Movidiam podcast. Join the conversation with global innovators as they share their journeys, discuss the state of the industry, and share insight into the future of media for brands, agencies, and production companies.
Hello and welcome to the Movidiam Creative Leaders podcast. Today I'm delighted to welcome Sara McCorquodale, who is the founder of CORQ. Sara, welcome to the Movidiam podcast.
Hi.
Sara's got a very enthusiastic hi, and I know it's a very challenging time, and you're probably absolutely exhausted because we're in the middle of the just coming out of the pandemic process, and normal life is beginning to reform. And you've got a couple of initiatives which we're going to discuss, which kind of shine a bit of a spotlight on some of the challenges. But just tell us a little bit about you and how you got started in business.
Sure. So I was a journalist for 12 years. I started in local news, and I actually spent half my career covering news, crime, court. And then I worked in news. I worked on the launch of Mail Online. And then a job came up at Condé Nast to be the first digital editor of Tatler. So I went there and I put Tatler online, and that was great. I loved it because, when you're covering things like court and news, it can be quite exciting, but the parties are usually quite rubbish. And then to go
The parties got better.
I mean, that's an understatement. I went from reporting at Crown Court, really, to sitting in on 2-hour meetings where we discuss, okay, we're going to have a party to celebrate the Royal Jubilee. Should we make it mandatory that everyone wears a crown? And I just loved it. I loved Tatler. The editor at that point was Kate Reardon, and you're just a magazine that was just staffed by really clever people. So I was there for just over a year. Oh God, it was so fun. Honestly, best year of my career.
Yeah, but then after that, so journalism, Tatler, amazing, Crowns versus Crown prosecution, and
exactly.
and an interesting route forward into building your own business, which is CORQ. So for our users that might kind of completely get the concept of influencers, or probably want to be one but aren't, and many producers who want to work with them because brands are asking for it, but it's quite a challenge in terms of a talent contract. What does CORQ do, and how does it help sort of new age creatives today?
Sure. So we are a team of journalists, and basically we independently seek out new talent and very sort of successful talent, very relevant talent. And we profile those people independently, and we publish, basically who they are onto our platform. And we don't have a relationship with the talent. We don't make any money off the talent. This is us really looking I suppose sort of really in an unbiased way, we're looking across the digital talent landscape and saying, okay, who should brands be working with now? And we look across fashion, beauty, gaming, all of the kind of like usual kind of influencer hotspots. But then also, we look for people who are poets and artists, and they're using digital platforms to sort of, get their work out there. So we're really interested, I suppose, in people who do interesting things, and that generates a substantial reaction online. And our platform, our service is used by, some of like the best loved brands in the world, which is fantastic.
And that's amazing. So how have you sort of built that up over the years? So when did it launch?
So we launched in 2017, and it really started as a sort of, a platform where you could go on, you could find influencers, you could see their background checks. So, we do everything from, like what they do online to their professional background, academic background. Do they have any prior convictions, any controversies? Also to the things that really make them human, like, they love Marmite, or they're sober, or, they're vegan. And so it really began as that. And then we moved into social media trend forecasting, which was really the thing I think that started to hook us clients, because, we could sort of see that, for example, like the lockdown trend, which has really taken hold and I think will remain for the rest of the year, is this lifestyle trend called cottagecore.
Cottagecore, yeah, I've been following that online and seeing amazing pixies and deer and daffodils and things in all these amazing images and people constructing these things.
Yeah, and it was like a real Tumblr trend.
Yeah.
And now it's just crossed over to Instagram and in some cases YouTube, and then it also has the subculture dark cottagecore, which is very gothic. And actually a lot of influencers have completely changed the aesthetic of their platforms based on the fact they've adopted cottagecore in the past kind of 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
So we kind of started to see.
Gosh, that sounds like a text message coming in. Do you need to get some influencers into Unilever?
Oh my God! Honestly, I feel like because everyone's working from home.
I know, love it. It's great.
Oh,
totally. I mean, the way that Zoom and these sort of things has penetrated the home, so you can really sort of, and the universities. I mean, the education system has been completely upended by this. What are folks paying for after discovering that the Zoom camera goes in and what is actually being delivered? The same experience that has been for 90 years. So many interesting things going on with this particular time frame that we're living through. I was sort of feeling, just listening to your description of, validation of influences there and thinking, I quite like Marmite. I'm not sober and I like meat, so I just wouldn't fit the profile at all.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, though. I think that because
I'm only joking, by the way.
No, I mean, I think because we really do look into like who are these individuals as people, like I think often people kind of want, we find a lot of safety in numbers, what's the engagement rate and what's the growth rate and all of that kind of thing. But actually, we have to understand if we are to do good work with influencers, we have to understand who they are as people.
Sure.
And that's where we do quite well. And talking about Marmite, one of our clients came to us at the start of the year and said, I need 12 influencers who love Marmite, and we were able to just put Marmite into our platform, and it pulled up all the influencers who had talked about how much they loved Marmite.
Yeah, it's super smart. I mean, it's amazing what you can do when you have this sort of information. I often talk about the data, but both our businesses collect data for the benefit of the clients, and actually it's the question of how you use that and curate it and navigate and manage that sort of data lake that is created by your network so it can be usable and not just collected. Super interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, it's like we're kind of in this age where, we have like a lot of content, but sometimes finding information is just really hard.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. I think if you're a business who can give people definitive information that's going to help, either reinforce their decision that they've made or assist their decision-making process, that's quite a useful thing. That's quite worthwhile. So that's really our purpose, I suppose.
I think, if you think about the great football managers, you might not be a football fan. I'm not particularly either. But if you think about the great football managers out there, they're managing the players on the field and making sure they're passing and running appropriately, but they're also managing them off the field because they're representing the brand. And occasionally you get a footballer straying into a nightclub and all going wrong for them on the Daily Mail. It's quite challenging sometimes to manage the perhaps highly profiled, highly followed influencer that has no commercial experience but great influence, or influencer, exclamation marks, versus the sort of curated, trained Roger Federer style managed professional. I mean, have you come across that?
Oh yeah, I mean, so my book, which was kind of like a journalistic investigation of the influencer industry, was published by Bloomsbury last year. It's called Influence.
I was going to plug that as well. So I think that's a good thing to do on the creative leaders.
So I mean, part of that was basically really going into all of the problematic areas of this industry. And one of the things is that for a lot of these people, they've never really been managed, and also they started to grow their audience at a time when there was less scrutiny on social platforms. So their audience has sort of really bought into them because perhaps they are a bit controversial, or they are a bit kind of,
well, there's an authenticity to them. So that's why people create connection with authenticity, don't they? And brands of the traditional manufacturing create a projection, not an authenticity, perhaps.
Well, yeah, and I think as well, there's some influencers who they will say things that are misogynistic and racist and frankly sort of abhorrent, and their audience likes that, so they'll keep doing it. And that's the thing, it's like, and
that's complex. That's very, very complex.
It is complex, but I think that's the thing, it's like some brands will continue to fund those influencers because they're trying to tap into that audience, and I guess frankly they think, well, tapping into the audience is more important than
so there's got to be some core values or moral compass that kind of comes in here, and I suspect those folks will get blown out over time, or if not immediately.
Well, you say that, but obviously, the thing that has been really sort of interesting in the past week or so has been, sort of YouTube making a statement about Black Lives Matter and how they wanted to support the movement. And people are coming back and saying, well, you just put PewDiePie on the payroll, who has been, sort of racist numerous times on YouTube. So it's kind of like, I do think that at this point in time, I think it'd be a good time for brands to really think about who they're working with. And, most brands, I would say, like your kind of like everyday brands, they are very cautious, and they are very kind of like, they don't want to do anything that their customer would find, reprehensible.
Sure.
But it's not all brands. And I think that really we do need a really good understanding of who we're working with.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think there's, in the traditional sort of era of corporate development, the procurement team has been those people that have filtered that for the business, whether they're buying, corporate office flowers, loo roll, or creative talent. And, I think it's interesting that the modern organization needs to be skilled up at acquiring so many more different services and expertise because of the new way that we're living in a digital ecosystem. And I think, it's businesses like yours which are clearly going to accelerate into the future.
Well, I hope so. I mean,
if you can get past the COVID lockdown and the childcare and the no childcare, et cetera, et cetera.
Exactly. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? You kind of, I think that definitely we've kind of like pivoted a bit during coronavirus. We've definitely found ways to offer our customers more value. And, we're a subscription business. So we kind of thought, well, maybe we're going to see subscribers fall off, or maybe renewals won't happen. But actually, people have stayed with us. And, I'm really grateful for that because we're still a really young business.
Sure. Sarah, let's talk about your pro bono activity that you've got going on. You mentioned before we hit the record button. Tell us a bit about that and how that's materialized.
Sure. So at the start of the pandemic, we launched a digital accelerator called the Influence Initiative, where basically we decided we were going to work with 25 startups and small companies who were either, they were sustainable, their products were ethically produced, or they existed for some kind of social good. And we thought, okay, we're going to help them, gain those digital skills so that they can be more resilient. We're going to introduce them to mentors. We're going to introduce them to influencers who can promote their products. We're going to introduce them to editors so they can get some press. And we're sort of in week 9 now, and it's been amazing. It's been I've loved meeting all the founders and sort of learning about their challenges, the challenges that come up when you are trying to do a business sustainably. And
I think that's interesting. That's hard, isn't it? I mean, you think, off the cuff, you think sustainable business, great, but capital is going to flow towards that. But actually, there's probably a whole bunch of barriers to entry which you don't think of on the executive summary.
Completely. And I think, you have to think a lot about supply chain. You have to be, sort of also a lot of these businesses are very personality led, because essentially you're asking the consumer to spend more on your product, which on the face of it is the same as a non-sustainable product that costs less and perhaps, you know, maybe looks as good or tastes as nice in some way. So, you know, the thing that we found with a lot of the businesses was, you know, they're all these like really sort of passionate founders who work so hard, and they do really well because they go to things like farmers markets, or, you know, like a lot of it is in real life communication, because nobody can talk about their product like them, and they're brilliant salespeople in real life. But what we found was they had to learn how to translate that onto the internet. So that's
the internet and the commercial contract.
Yeah, well, actually, a lot of them, they were doing pretty well commercially because they had found suppliers, they had regular income from things like markets and maybe events and stuff like that. But actually, the problem was that now, obviously, because of lockdown, and you can't have, you know, those events have been cancelled. Those farmers markets are closed, you know. Well, I guess they'll be opening back up now, but they've kind of had to really accelerate any ideas around digital. So like, how do they become a direct consumer brand?
Yeah.
How do they turn their website into an e-commerce website? So it's just, it's been great. We're so glad we've done it. We've loved our founders. You know, the businesses themselves have connected, and, you know, they're helping each other. They're working together. And we've got our next intake is September. So we've got about 70 businesses on the waiting list for it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're just going to keep going.
Really interesting. Really interesting. Now, Sarah, I've just thought of something which has come to mind whilst we've been talking, and it's kind of, it bridges both your talking about crowns for parties at Tatler and then the influencer business. You know, so it's the journalist versus influencer. So actually, kind of like in one thought, it might be that the kind of influencer is replacing the journalist, but you seem to be sort of in both camps, you know, or in the middle camp where it's all about management, or you're an editor effectively of who has access. So how have you found that? How do you find that the journalistic business is being affected by people building following, so they don't need to necessarily work with an editorial or a distribution organization?
Oh, I mean, it's been really disruptive. And I think as well, what we're really seeing is, you know, everything is just approximating in the digital space. So, you know, if you're a journalist, you're kind of encouraged to be an influencer now. You're encouraged to have a social following.
And does that work, though? Because it's what is good in pen and paper and in a traditional broadcast is the pen and paper might be a little bit lost on the personality side. I mean, you've got a great personality, and I'm sure you'd be great as an influencer journalist. But, you know, does that work? Are people transferring those skills easily, or is it damn hard for a journalist to become an influencer and be on Instagram Live and Snapchat and TikTok and talking, you know, in the same way as they were cerebrally writing for black and white print?
Oh, I think it just totally depends on the person. Like, you know, I think like there are obviously like some columnists who are just so good on Twitter. Like Hugo Rifkin's really funny. Caitlin Moran's really funny. I think that like Gary Young and how he kind of like talks about the issues that he's covering, it's also really compelling. And then, you know, on Instagram, you've got people like Jessica Diner, who's the beauty director of Vogue. You know, she's really sort of, you know, transferred all of that knowledge into a kind of Instagram friendly format. So it totally depends on the person. But, you know, the thing is, I think like the motivation for journalists to become influencers is sort of not the same, because, you know, it's very difficult to monetize your content if you are a journalist for a publication. Generally, you're not allowed to do like brand deals. Whereas for an influencer, you know, it's all about getting that money through, you know, like monetizing your following through sponsorships, brand deals, perhaps launching products if you have that ability. So, you know, it's kind of like, I think like a lot of publications want journalists to have these big followings, but, you know, they're not really, journalists don't really make any money off the back of it. So it's a bit of a tricky one.
Yeah, it's interesting though, isn't it? I mean, it's very interesting, and it's dynamic change. Well done for sort of bridging, having a foot in both camps and bridging it and launching CORQ and obviously having the success you're having with advising people about how to do that with peat retardant gloves on.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing, isn't it? When I started, I bet you have a story like this as well. When I started in 2017, all of my journalist friends were like, "You're insane. Why are you doing this thing about YouTubers and Instagrammers?" And, you have to have this sort of faith that actually, no, this is something.
It is something.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I mean, I think people do have blind faith when they start businesses, and I think it's a good expression is innocence is its own protection. Because actually, we were running a production company relatively successfully, and we were getting bigger and bigger briefs and more challenging geographies, and we thought there isn't a tool out there to network these people efficiently to get these answers overnight and blah, blah, blah. So we went ahead and built it. And I think it's often scratching your own itch, which causes these things to spur up, isn't it?
Yeah, I think as well, if for me, I just kept thinking, it just makes sense. It's so weird this doesn't exist already, And when I first started, when I developed my MVP, which for anyone listening, it's the first version of your product, minimum viable product. So the very least that you need to make it function and to show people what it does.
People always do far too much. They always build far too much tech and not enough culture.
It's true. And actually, when I was first kind of like thinking about, okay, well, what's going to be in my MVP, I went to see a friend who works for DeepMind, like the AI company.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I said, okay, it's going to do this, it's going to do that, it's going to do this. And she was like, no, Sarah, it's going to cover one region, it's going to do this, it's going to do that. And, she really brought me back down to like, what is this product in its simplest form? And when we developed it, so we developed MVP and we kind of got that out to beta users in the second half of 2017. And I went to see my friend at Net-a-Porter and he said, God, this is like game changer. This is going to be amazing. And then the thing I sort of didn't realize was like, yeah, it's great when someone says that something you've done is game changer, but then you have to change the game.
Yeah, well, there's a behavioral curve, isn't there? And actually, there's something like COVID comes along and makes it game-changing for everyone simultaneously. So the kind of there's a collective water cooler moment, and everyone's rushing to digital and how they can impact stuff. So I think that's probably a good moment to end it, Sarah. But it's been very, very interesting talking to you today on the Movidiam Creative Leader podcast, and perhaps we can catch up in 6 months down the line when no doubt your business has added a whole bunch of more features and more influential people.
Oh, I hope so. Thank you very much. Lovely to speak to you.
You've been listening to the Movidiam podcast. Movidiam is a world-class network of production talent complemented by secure tools that blend hiring, communication, and payments. Find out more at movidiam.com.